Organizational growth, development, and change. So, as an overview, I will be discussing the importance of effective change, defining features of organizations, a model of organizational growth and change, factors influencing change, planned change versus unplanned change, and communicating the need for change.
Talk about the importance of effective change. One big point is that organizations must change to survive. So, an organization has to respond to the new threats, whether internal or external, that they face, and therefore they're presented with new opportunities. For the change process also has to be skillfully managed, which means that one must understand that everything influences change. So you have to decide how a company will respond to this change, the consequences. They have to take everything into account. An example of what causes change is a downsizing procedure like redeployment. Redeployment involves selecting employees for retention rather than actually targeting employees for dismissal. In certain cases, like in the case that's used in the course reading, FDL, a company, has their employees faced with many redeployment outcomes. These include anything from demotion to a less comparable job, promotion, being fired, assigned to a same job, or no job offer at all. So changes in your employment status usually affect the changes in the organization, and these are things that have to be taken into account. Um, what the chapter pretty much wants to start summarizing is that effective change is very important. So however well planned and executed your changes are, it's going to help the organization as a whole become more effective, with whether it's productivity or the people's motivation. Okay, so defining features of organizations. All organizations differ. They're different types. They come from different environments. They all have different goals. They have different leadership techniques. They use different forms of technology. Based on what each organization does, they're very different, and they all have, however, they do all have a set of defining features. Just to set it up, organizations are defined as social entities with identifiable boundaries that are goal-directed and have deliberately structured activity systems. So to go through each of those, organizational social entities. So what that means is that an organization, especially when it changes, it involves a change in people's thinking, attitudes, and behavior. So it's a social atmosphere where one thing will affect everything, because the organization is made up of different groups of people and individuals who all communicate with each other on a daily basis, doing their own job. So even though everyone has their own role in an organization, people interact with each other, making it a very social environment. Next, organizations have identifiable boundaries. What this means is that pretty much to distinguish between people who are in that company and who are not, they have boundaries. They create their own social entity, their own community of people. This can be between levels of leadership or management, or between actual companies. All organizations are goal-directed. Even though it'll vary from organization what their goals are depending on what they want to accomplish, all goals have important motivational properties that help people focus their behavior and sustain high levels of effort over time. So when these things are altered, when things are changed in the organization, everything changes. So when the management, when their goals change, the employees' goals change. So basically, organizations are created to help achieve goals and desired outcomes, but they all have to have a coordinated effort. Finally, organizations have deliberately structured activity systems. What this means is that each task you have is going to be divided by a department. So if you work for human resources, your department will be human resources, and all your tasks will be under that department. This makes things easier for the organization so that they can be more structured and organized, and usually this type of division is coordinated. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about organizations as systems. A system can be considered a collection of parts that come together for the purpose of one overall goal, and the importance of an organization operating as a system is that it can help you analyze your problems differently and approach different tasks in the organization differently. The textbook describes a system as an organized unit composed of two or more interdependent parts that exist within a larger environmental system or supersystem. It can have parts that operate on its own, but they won't operate on an integrated level, which would make the organization suffer because none of the parts would come together as a whole. Therefore, everyone will be doing their own thing, so it won't look as a united front. There are different types of systems. There's a closed system, there's an open system, and you can also view the organization as a social system. A closed system is basically one that consists on its own and is completely separate from its environment. It doesn't take in any materials or products. It basically is defined by a movement towards entropy. And entropy is a process of basically eventual death of the organization or of the system, because without bringing in new things or letting go of old things, the system is not refreshing itself, so it makes it very hard to be new and improved when it's not taking in anything new or expelling any of its waste, as they call it. The other option is an open system, which is described as a set of interrelated and interconnecting elements that acquires inputs from the environment and discharges outputs to the external environment. So it's the opposite of a closed system because it takes in and excharges things. An example would be a product or service company, because for products you take in the raw materials, you make the product and you send them out, and then you get profit from that. Or there's a service, which could be hospitals, government agencies, schools, where you basically the satisfying the service is you're processing the need of others, so the need to be taken care of in a hospital, and you're outputting people's needs who have already been met to the environment, so you're doing your job. Finally, the organization is a social system. It's a kind of open system, but it relies on individuals and groups to actually work together and communicate. This way, the organization is more coordinated and it's on a structured role. Therefore, like, everyone's actual role in the organization is united, and through that, the organization will operate more as a whole as opposed to separate little departments. Organization of growth and change. In this section, it talks about basically how an organization goes through its life cycle, which is the birth of the organization to the time that it's actually terminated or it shuts down. It's broken down into 5 stages, which talks about the challenges and the crises that each organization will go through and have to overcome to survive as an organization. Throughout the 5 phases, they are birth, growth, maturity, revival, and decline. It will go through a process of saying in each phase how big the organization is, its structure, whether it's informal, formal, bureaucratic, whether the way it's divided. It'll also go through the type of environment it has in each stage, whether it's a placid environment or competitive. And then as the stage goes on, the organization will most likely get bigger, but the environments will get more competitive or suffer. The first stage is the birth phase, and it's basically a simple and informal structure. The focus is to survive because it's the beginning stage when it's first starting out. Here they're concerned with the aspect of technology and the production and marketing of the company, and how this is controlled through management and how the management is actually working early on. At this point, they must have a very effective and productive manager to deal with all the employees and all the crises and challenges that come up. If they are able to get through that stage and solve all the immediate crises, then they can go to the second stage, which is the growth stage. And this is once all the leadership problems are solved, the organization has experienced some success. They have some formal structure, but the environment is slowly starting to become competitive. However, at this point, most of the employees know what their job is, their goals have been clarified, they begin to identify with the organization, its visions, its missions, and they learn to delegate work well between their fellow co-workers, as well as take authority well from their superiors. If this goes well and people aren't overloaded with the amount of work, they go to the maturity stage. At this point, the company gets larger. It has a more formal bureaucratic structure, and the environment is so competitive. At this point, growth slows down, and the structure of the environment stays formal. However, more layers of the management level are added to accommodate to all the stress that the organization has to take in, and all the decisions they have to make as the organization does get bigger. If they make it through that, the next stage is the revival phase. This is where the organization is at its largest, and the environment is very dynamic and competitive. Not all organizations actually pass through this phase. but depending on the type of market the organization is, they might have to, or they might actually just stay where they are in the phase of development. The final stage is the decline phase. This is where the organization decreases in size. The environment is still competitive, but the market's declined. So the growth of the organization slows down. It becomes more risky to take chances in certain tasks. They become less innovative as they try to pretty much conserve all the resources they have left, as opposed to actually producing profit. So they try to keep their company as opposed to actually being successful at this point.